Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Very confused very quickly. Like, Firefox just popped up and then was like, what happened? Okay, now then. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen, another mini-sode. I am Sydpart2. Joining me today is Alex, a.k.a. SuperheroEnthuiast.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going, Alex?
It's going okay.
That's good, that's good. So, Alex and I are both, really interested in philosophy, and comic books, and more specifically, Superman and Batman comic books. I know we're both fairly big fans of those. And there's been something that's, like, kind of on my mind every so often. I've even written a whole paper on this, and in retrospect, I probably should have reread it before doing this video so I'd have my argument more clearly made in my head, but... like, alright, so, major philosopher of the 19th century is Friedrich Nietzsche. And he proposes the idea of an Ubermensch, Overman, Superman. There's a number of ways it can be translated. And people have made the argument before that Superman, the one we know from the comics, is the embodiment of this idea in certain respects. I respectfully disagree, and I say it's Batman. Alex, where would you stand on this one?
It's sort of a difficult, like, question to answer, and, like, who do I pick, Superman or Batman? Because the concept of the Ubermensch is incredibly complex, and we're talking about two characters that have existed for basically 3/4 of a century and have been portrayed numerous different ways.
Yeah.
And so to say, you know, Superman is or isn't an Ubermensch, Batman is or isn't as well, I know we sort of maybe need to get more specific with, like, which version of the character, but in general... it's tough. I lean towards saying no for Superman and yes for Batman, but it sort of depends on the interpretation.
That's definitely fair. Whenever, like, questions about, you know, who could win in a fight, or whenever someone just says Superman, Batman, I never think of a particular version. I just kind of think of, like, I think of the overarching narrative structure of the character. The elements of the character that are in just about every version, unless the alternate version you have is doing something very specific to be different. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just trying to think of an example. Like, there's an alternate version of the Joker where he's a superhero in the Crisis on Two Earths. So that wouldn't be considered, you know, Joker when we're talking about him in general, but
of course,
through every version of the Joker, there's some kind of through line, I'd like to think, you know? There's some elements that are always the same.
Yeah, clown guy who wants to defeat Batman.
Yeah, and I think with Batman and Superman we can be much more specific about the general concepts, you know. Batman, orphan, driven, very highly trained, very intelligent. Even in, like, the Nolan films where he isn't, like, super detective, he's still a relatively smart guy. You know, he fixed his autopilot and everything. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to go about doing that, so.
It is one of those puzzling things.
Yeah, I mean, like, where do you even start? But anyway, and Superman, I'd like to think that they're, you know, Jesus or Moses allegory, whichever you'd like. little bit of a blending of the two, which is, it started with Jewish writers, and then more and more Christian writers got a hold of it over the years.
That's the
which
funny
is
thing.
exactly what happened with the Bible.
Yeah. There's pretty much a whole video in that, I think.
Yeah. But, so, like, Superman, you got the allegory for the Savior. Let's be even more ambiguous while trying to be specific. You got the allegory of the Savior. You've got, the idea that he can never do anything wrong. It is a good question about narrowing it down, but, I don't think I can think of that many specific examples to pull for Batman. Like, I can think of examples from different comics in different eras, but the examples I'd pull aren't things that any of the other examples of Batman that I'd pull wouldn't do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get you.
Okay. I think that there's an argument there for Superman that can be made in much the same way.
So let me hit you with this.
All right.
An essential part of the Ubermensch is that they destroy bad values, sustain good values, and create new values when they're needed, according to, I guess, the situation. I think you can make a pretty strong argument for Superman not being an Ubermensch because he gets his values from, Midwestern farm people who are presumably, Protestant Christians.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually the thing that I think makes the strongest case for Batman, because people always say, well, he's a hypocrite because he goes and fights crime, but no one else can fight crime unless he says so. And, like, I think that's part of it. It's just he creates his own system of values. Like, if I say it's okay, then it's okay. He almost does that whole do as I say, not as I do thing sometimes. But he does create this idea that it's okay because I say it's okay, not because I have to, explain myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, they're both characters, though, who go outside the law in order to bring justice. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, they are trying to preserve the system, to some extent, both of them. So,
yeah, I think
you can maybe then make an argument like, maybe they're both not.
That's definitely true, but I think the idea of the law is... Alright, I promise I'll get back to that, but I need to express this thought before I can express that thought. Alright, so, Neil Gaiman, Whatever Happened to Cape Crusader, my absolute favorite Batman story. He's having a conversation with his mom as he dies, or his idea of his mom, and she says... You don't get some final reward. You don't get heaven or hell. You get to be Batman. And I find that really interesting because what Bruce Wayne always wanted growing up and what he made himself into was someone to come in and stop what happened to him. Now, that's why Batman exists, is because there needed to be someone to stop, just the random crook in an alley. And we've seen that portrayed in a number of Batman stories, where a lot of Batman stories start out with him stopping someone in an alley. Even 89 got that much right. Mm-hmm. So, there's that, and I think that to Batman, the law is very important, because if it had been followed correctly in a number of continuities, Joe Chill wouldn't have been able to kill his parents, or in 89 again, Joker, because, I can't even remember. I'm sorry, but what I'm trying to say is, I think the law is important to Batman, at least, because it allows him to have some basis for his own morality, but there are definitely laws that he completely ignores, especially when it comes to people like Catwoman. He definitely... He doesn't create every single aspect of his own moral code, but he creates, I guess, asterisk little footnotes to the law that only apply to him, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think, back to my point about, the values and stuff, and that all of the values that do exist and are embodied by society are not inherently going to be bad. So it's okay to sustain some of them if they're still valid. They pass the, I guess, the Nietzschean hammer test. Let me throw this at you. Batman is about justice, which is a realizable thing, and it can be here and now. Superman is about hope, which is an otherworldly sort of potential future thing. A big part of Nietzschean values is that they have to be life-affirming, which both characters' values are, because they typically refuse to kill their villains. But hope is a somewhat ethereal, non-tangible sort of a thing. That definitely doesn't really line up with, I guess, sort of the values that Nietzsche would have thought were positive ones.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because Nietzsche was so against what he called slave religion, but really he was just talking about Christianity. Now, see, this is actually what made me think of this topic is the last video I did with Milan, who has been off the map since his internet died. He said, isn't Nietzsche, didn't he basically just write, like, the handbook for sociopaths? And I'm like, no, because clearly he wouldn't be okay with rape. There are things that, like, people say, oh, well, Nietzsche threw out morals, so he's okay with murder and rape and everything. No, he's not, because those are things that are done to make yourself feel better because you secretly feel,
powerless or,
Yeah, powerless, inept, in some cases. So, I think that it's a really interesting discussion. I think that when you look at the slave religion, as Nietzsche called it, of Christianity, Jesus is a character that preached forgiveness and wanted to spread hope and faith. And I believe Nietzsche would best describe it as he was wanting to spread those things to make the weak feel better while they were in their situation, which is why the idea of the eternal return came around. He meant it much more as a metaphorical thing about, if you think about your life happening over and over again the exact same ways, would you want it to happen over and over again this way? And if you're a slave or, if you're an extremely weak person that's being trodden upon, then no, of course not. So you'd ideally take action to change that statute in life. And it's one of those things about Superman, he inspires hope, and I've said it before, I think Superman is a better Jesus than Jesus. So, it mostly has to do with the sacrifice. I think Superman inspires hope, so he does inspire people to try to change their lot in life. He doesn't inspire hope in, I think, the same way that Nietzsche considered Christianity inspiring hope.
That's probably true. The eternal return is a big part of his philosophy. It's this kind of brilliant little heuristic that you can, judge what you're going to do and whether or not it's worth doing and how you feel about things. Because he cared all about, love of fate and...
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. We had a technical difficulty. Fucking Skype. Or maybe it's Canada's fault. I don't know. Blame Canada. It has a song just for that, so...
Sure.
Anyway, go ahead. Go on, Alex.
Nietzsche cared all about love of fate, and everything kind of comes back to that, and just sort of embracing life. And that's not supposed to be fatalistic, I guess. But it is, feeds into the whole master-slave morality dynamic that he had. And slave values were ones that weren't life-affirming.
Yeah, he didn't like the idea of just,
He was radically non-consolatory.
Sure, that sounds much more intelligent than what I was saying. Go ahead and explain that, because those words went over my head.
He didn't believe in consolation for anything. He didn't believe in, it's going to be okay. No, that's denial of reality. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I don't know if you caught it, but I was saying that he didn't like comforting people. He didn't like the idea of, it may not be true, but it'll make him feel better. He was very much that, I don't care if the truth hurts, it's the truth kind of mentality.
Yeah, tough love.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the quote of his, but it was like, it's something to the effect of, I hope you have pain, suffering, may a pock be upon your house, so that you may get through it on the other side and be a better person for it. It's like, oh, excellent.
Well, yeah, it is all about the, what doesn't overcome me makes me stronger. It's, let's take all the terrible experiences that we have and use them to grow. Let's make them learning experiences.
Yeah, one of his favorite metaphors was the idea of mountain climbing, because it's a very hard thing to do. There's a lot of pain and sweat and tears involved in it. And once you get to the top, you just got to go right back down, but you feel better for having done it. Is kind of the idea. So I'm just like, the more I think about Nietzsche, and this is what leads me to my side of the argument, and I want to get into more of why you think Superman can qualify, because I see some merit to it, but overall I kind of just dismiss it. To me, Batman does all that. Like, the most fundamental thing that makes Batman the Ubermensch is that he worked for it. Whereas with Superman, he kind of just lucked out. His father put him in the position to, be an Ubermensch, or be considered one. Whereas Batman, it's all blood, sweat, and tears. He did everything, like he trained his entire life to be Batman,
Mm-hmm. And it was all a process of overcoming, the trauma, what happened to, his parents and stuff. He is someone who, lives up to that Nietzschean motto.
Mm-hmm. That's why I consider him to be the best, fictional example of an Ubermensch, at least. And I do feel bad every day that Batman isn't real. It's just so weird. I end up having these really deep conversations about fucking fictional characters, and end of the day, it's like, well, that was fun.
Yeah, he's not anywhere to be found.
Yeah. But, what do you think qualifies Superman in particular? Because, I'd heard you make what also put into my mind is forever ago in one of your earliest YouTube videos, I remember you saying that, explaining, philosophy and superheroes, and you said I'd start out with Superman and Nietzsche, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that would be an interesting video to make, and I might do that at some point. I really, really need to collect my thoughts about that and plan it out. But, yeah, it's sort of interesting. I do think his values are life-affirming. Definitely. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he needs to have had anything, huge to overcome. I mean, there are versions of the character where, he loses his father. Jonathan Kent dies, and that is sort of inspirational for him, and it kind of feeds into his desire to help people. So yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, I guess I come down on him not being, but I don't think it's necessarily as clean of a nope, he's not, as maybe some people think.
Yeah, it's not like he's... I'm not going to say that he's absolutely no. I mean, there's an argument there. I'm just curious, if you had a stronger opinion on it. Because, like I said, I'd heard you say that sometime beforehand. And I was wondering if you had any, arguments that you could make for it.
Part of it might, too, be the use of force thing. And, I mean, to some extent that comes with, every superhero. So... and he is the one who sort of, pioneered that. He is, the first superhero. But yeah, I don't know. It's so sort of bizarre that, he doesn't, I guess, embody every element of necessary to make an Ubermensch. And, he has that name. And that's because of that, it's something that's, always been brought up with regards to the character.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those weird things. I think Superman is definitely something that's noble to strive toward in many respects. It's a really weird thing to point to because there's a lot wrong with this movie, but the first trailer for Superman Returns... I don't know why I always go back to that, but all it is just shots of the movie with Marlon Brando as Jor-El, and he's talking about how Superman will inspire mankind to be better. They can be a great people if they wish to be. They only like the light to show the way. And, it goes on, and then the last line he has in it is, and one day, my son, they will join you in the sun, or something like that. And I think that's a really good place for Superman. I've made the argument before, I think Superman's a better Jesus than Jesus, and it's because the majority of what Jesus does in the New Testament is not what I would consider slave morality.
Nietzsche was actually somewhat of a fan of Jesus. He said, the first and only true Christian died on the cross.
Yeah, I love that quote. No, but, a lot of Jesus' teachings really work. The biggest, problem I have with it is the sacrifice, because what it is Jesus forgives all of us for all our sins, so you can always be forgiven by asking for Jesus' forgiveness. And certainly, to ask for Jesus' forgiveness properly, you're supposed to get the forgiveness of the other person, or at least try to, or the person that you've wronged, but I still find it problematic, because say I punch you in the face, and this, for good reason, gets you a little angry, and then I, run to Milan, I'm like, Milan, I punched Alex in the face, I'm so sorry. Milan's like, it's okay. Because he's the only person I could think of that'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's problematic, because I should ask for your forgiveness, and I should only be concerned with your forgiveness, not this third party, even if Milan is, the son of Cthulhu or whatever. I should be worried all about you, and you seeing that I have made a genuine effort to change myself as a person who randomly punches people in the face to prove a point. So, that's my biggest problem with because the sacrifice of Jesus embodies that. He's sacrificed for the sins of everyone, whereas it doesn't really line up with everything else he teaches. He's all about, if your enemy strikes you on the cheek, offer them the other. So the sacrifice contradicts that, whereas with Superman, he's always striving to make people attempt to be like him. He's always trying to be the perfect, in the eyes of everyone, he's trying to be perfect. He doesn't want to have enemies. He just wants to have friends. He just wants to have people that have let him down, but he'll help them anyway. And I think that's a really good thing, and when Superman does die, like in the fight with Doomsday, or my personal favorite in All-Star Superman, where he goes to reignite the sun, mm-hmm. It's to save everyone, and it thus makes the world a better place, because everyone remembers that, and they want to be worthy of that sacrifice, which is, I don't think, something that Jesus' sacrifice does.
Yeah, the Jesus thing is difficult because it involves Hebrew metaphysics and all sorts of weird ideas that are in the Jewish religion. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe to bring it a little bit back to Superman and to Nietzsche, a thing that's important to remember about the Ubermensch is it's not necessarily an end point. It's more mm-hmm. the process, someone who embodies the process of the reevaluation of all values, which is a constant, ongoing process. We don't just decide tomorrow, okay, these are the good values. We have to figure that out, every day, minute by minute. And so because Superman is an unachievable ideal by human standards, he actually serves as somewhat of a decent thing, because he will always be better than what we can be.
And, you can make the same argument for Batman, but I do see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Because, that's one of the things about Batman. Actually, funnily enough, I think the argument actually works better for Batman, because the most appealing thing about the character is he's just a man that can do everything perfect. So there's no way he's just a man. But, I do see what you're saying with Superman in the context of the universe. No one can be Superman, but that's what makes him so appealing, and that's what makes him so much to strive toward. Mm-hmm. Whereas, in reality, no one can be Batman, but I do want to be Batman. Alex, will you kill my parents for me?
Oh, with pleasure.
One of my favorite jokes is, my nephew came up to me the other day, and he's like, Ian, I want to be Batman when I grow up. And you know me, guys, I'm a really caring individual. I like to help people achieve their goals, so I murdered both of his parents in front of him. It's a really dark joke.
Yeah. That's the flip side to being Batman.
Yeah. See, here's a question, though, that I guess... I mean, it seems only right to bring into account a counter argument for my argument that Batman is the Ubermensch, if I can get that sentence out correctly. Batman is born of tragedy. He's always trying to recover, and end of the day, he knows he won't be able to. Whereas what Superman does, he does simply because he wants to. So it's an interesting question of, is Batman doing it just because he wants to or because he feels like he has to? Or would Batman be Batman if not for the death of his parents kind of thing, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Would Batman still try to be the very best there ever was? Would catching them be his test? Would training them be his cause? Sorry, I realized where I was at with that, and I just had to finish the joke. No, but like, would Bruce Wayne still try to become something like Batman if his parents hadn't died when he was young?
Probably not. And that's the thing, is that he comes face to face with reality. With the mugger in the alleyway, and he can't really retreat after that. And I don't know, maybe he could, and I guess that is always the thing. Batman says, I made a promise, so like he did at one point, even if it was when he was a child, make a choice to, rid the city of crime, do the thing, prevent what happened to him from happening to anyone else.
Yeah, and that's my thing, is Batman gets to be Batman. That's all he gets out of this, is he gets to be the thing that he always wanted. And I think that's really interesting.
I think that is very Nietzschean, because it is, the reward is being Batman, like Neil Gaiman said in that story.
Yeah, and I mean, God, I love when people sum up a character in just a sentence or something. That always impresses me.
Here's an idea, because you mentioned All-Star Superman, and it kind of got me thinking about this, because I have sort of an interesting interpretation about that. But a big part of Nietzsche's philosophy, too, was the value void left by the death of God. Like, we don't get values from the supernatural and from religion anymore. He was afraid that people would go back into religion or silly eternalist things, or just become complete nihilists. I think Nietzsche, like the postmodernists, was very skeptical of meta-narratives, but at the same time, I think he also realized that we need them. And so, Superman, to some extent, I don't know, he's maybe not an Ubermensch, because he's sort of a modernist in a way. Like, he has a very specific, kind of narrative by which he lives his life. And I can't really think of any Superman stories that he really focused on him questioning that much. He certainly doesn't seem to question it as much as, Batman questions whether or not he's doing the right thing. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, because Batman's always wondering, he's faced with, like, these funhouse mirror reflections of himself all the time, whereas Superman's just faced with, like, kind of sort of silly villains, gods, and, an egotistical bastard.
Other people with some type of power.
Yeah, like, I mean, Darkseid is, for all intents and purposes, a god. The god of evil. And I think it's cool that, like, whenever I describe Superman fighting Darkseid, I rarely say Darkseid. I say he's fighting the god of evil, because it just sounds so much cooler.
Darkseid is.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I think Superman questions himself, and a couple weeks ago, when we did the, I think it was during the episode on immortality, I brought up the idea that, the Doctor is a character that gets very upset with humanity from time to time, and in an episode of Torchwood it was described that sometimes he just can't stand to look at them. And I think, you just made me think of that, because I can't think of a time Superman gets fed up with people,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a time that Superman got angry because, people let him down. And honestly, to go to God of Evil or Darkseid's line, super or not, he is just a man, whereas I am a god. Superman is still, emotionally, psychologically, a human being because he was raised around human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So he should feel disappointment and a type of anger at people not living up to what he wants them to be. He should feel frustration about that from time to time. And it's weird that we rarely see it, if ever. Because you're right, I can't think of it. I'm sure there's something, but I can't think of, the moments where, the iconic comic book moment where it happened.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are times when he retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, but typically it's in stories where, he's much older and, Lois has passed away, and it's more for personal reasons rather than, I'm fed up with all you puny humans.
Mm-hmm. Was that he was disappointed with the heroes in Kingdom Come, but
True.
I don't think he'd given up on humanity on the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Given up's the wrong word. Words. He hadn't just every so often we just need Superman to give that look of disappointment that your mom gave you when you broke something. I'm not mad, humanity. I'm just very disappointed in you. I don't know. Superman needs that every so often because it's weird for him to be the perfect man idealistically, but also in action day in and day out when, every other week there's still a mugging or, someone's trying to take over the world. And part of that's, the publication. God, we need a series of Superman, Batman, all the big-name heroes. We need a series of graphic novels that are completely self-contained and get to tell the entirety of those characters' stories. Because so often, it's really not meant to continue past this point. It's not meant to go on forever, and I think Superman's a good example of that. There should be an end goal. People should be, honestly, Superman, and you'll appreciate this, Superman should inspire kind of like a Star Trek style civilization.
Yeah.
That should be the end of what Superman does, Batman should, he can't rid the city of crime, but, Batman should stop street crime to some level, or, take down all organized crime in Gotham or something.
Well, I mean, in The Dark Knight Rises, he inspires the city to, rise up and save themselves at the end. Because he realizes, if kind of like what Alfred did with him, pull away. You need to force them to deal with their own problems. You can help them for a while, but yeah. So it's, I would really like to see that, a version of characters where it's you go from birth or even preconception, or pre-birth in Superman's case, all the way to their death and after.
Yeah, I think that'd be really interesting, that's one of the things that is really great about the Dark Knight trilogy, is it's a complete story and it will never be touched again. You really can't touch it again. You can do something with, Robin Blake. Yeah, Robin Blake. You can do something with Robin Blake, but honestly, that's not that interesting a story. It's just someone making sure that what happened in the last 3 movies stays around. And I think you can do some interesting things with Superman like that. I'd like to see the society that... Because it's weird. There's always, those really weird Silver Age-ish stories where, Superman inspires a lineage of Superman, or Supermen, and there's, generations upon generations of Supermen that are protecting the galaxy. I'm like, why would you need that if he did it right? You know?
Yeah, that's the thing that I always kind of find, like, I like the Beyond universe, but at the same time, it's horribly depressing to realize, like, the Justice League didn't fundamentally change anything.
Yeah. Right? It's disappointing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's an interesting question, but this is almost a video in and of itself. I mean...
Yeah.
Just one final thing that I thought of, then lost it, then thought of again. We're at this point in time where we got a lot of series that are on air for a very set number of years. Breaking Bad, Dexter. They go through their stories, and they tell the story the number of stories they think they need to tell. They flesh out this character, and they put him at a point where it ends, and ideally it'll never be picked up again because they've decided it's done. And I think it'd be interesting to get some, television series with Superman or with Batman that have a definitive ending, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be worthwhile to do. But as far as the actual topic of the video with Batman, Superman, and Nietzsche, I think that's a good title for it. Yeah. Batman, Nietzsche. those, that's a Super Friends team for you. Superman comes in and puts out the fire, Batman grabs the little girl, and then Nietzsche tells her all the problems with her life.
They defeat Lex Luthor, and Lex is like, I read your book. And Nietzsche's just like, fuck you.
So you're the ones fucking up everything. Sorry. But yeah, I think that they both definitely show parts of the Uberman, but I think Batman represents it more as far as, like, I'd consider Batman nearly off the page, which is impressive since I know the majority of people that have written Batman probably haven't read much Nietzsche. So it's one of those weird things where, like, I wonder how much of the culture that Nietzsche changed influenced the writing of Batman.
Yeah, because he had a huge effect on 20th century philosophy. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those interesting things. Any final thoughts you want to put out?
I just, because of the name thing, it's sort of interesting to see with various versions of Superman them try and rationalize why he's called that, and with the whole Nietzsche tie-in, and the animated series had Lois Lane make a line. Smallville has an episode where I think Carter Hall, Hawkman, talks to Lois Lane and, like, basically really simply explains the Ubermensch, and he phrases it in such a way as to make it sound as if Superman is or could be one. It's not necessarily the most completely complete or genuine description of it, but I know it's just kind of one of those things that that character is going to be saddled with forever because of the name.
Yeah, alright, I know I said final thoughts, but let me just ask this real quick. I know you're not a fan of the movie, but how did you like how, you just made me think of it, how did you like how Man of Steel added the name Superman? As, like, just a nickname that the soldiers threw out.
It's okay, I just don't like how it was sort of phrased as a joke.
That is something that bothers the hell out of me in, like, all the Marvel movies. Iron Man. Well, it's actually oh, shut up. Actually go with it.
Yeah.
And,
it's okay.
This Incredible Hulk thing. Just say it, man. Don't make it a joke.
It's okay to embrace that you came from, a superhero comic.
Yeah. But alright. Everyone, thank you for listening. This was a lot of fun. This had been something that had been kind of on my brain for a while, and Alex, thank you for coming on to do it with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem, man. Alright, everyone. Until next time, we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing